Welcome to a one-story teller, your ultimate destination for the most unbelievable true stories that you have to see to believe. Today, we bring you a jaw-dropping moment where bravery, silence, and royalty collide. Imagine this: a decorated war hero wearing the Victoria Cross, the highest honor for courage, gets downgraded to economy on a flight. No drama, no protest, just quiet dignity. But then, something extraordinary happens. King Charles himself appears, changing everything in just minutes. Stay with us, because this isn't just a story. It's a powerful lesson about respect, honor, and the true meaning of leadership. Get ready for the unforgettable. The Victoria Cross, often abbreviated as VC, is far more than just a medal. It is a symbol of unparalleled gallantry, sacrifice, and devotion to duty. Instituted in 1856 by Queen Victoria, the decoration was intended to recognize acts of extraordinary bravery during the Crimean War, and since then, it has become the highest and most prestigious award in the British honors system. It holds a place of reverence, not only in military circles, but also in the national consciousness of the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth nations. What sets the Victoria Cross apart from other military decorations is not just its exclusivity or its historical origins, but the remarkable courage it represents. The medal is awarded only to those who perform acts of valor in the presence of the enemy. These words are not taken lightly, as each recipient's story is scrutinized in meticulous detail. The act must be beyond the call of duty, typically involving extreme danger and a complete disregard for personal safety in service of others or the mission. Crafted from the bronze of captured enemy cannons, the medal itself is modest in size but immense in meaning. It features a simple inscription, "For Valor." This succinct message encapsulates everything the medal stands for. It's not about grandeur or ceremonial pomp, it's about the raw, human quality of courage, often displayed in the most trying and dire circumstances. Recipients of the Victoria Cross come from all walks of life and military branches. Soldiers, sailors, airmen. Each recipient shares the common bond of having faced mortal danger and acted with heroism that defies easy explanation. Their stories are often harrowing, marked by moments where death was not only likely but almost certain. Yet, they pressed on, driven by a sense of duty, loyalty to comrades, and an unshakable inner resolve. Because of the stringent criteria for the award, the Victoria Cross is exceedingly rare. Since its creation, only a little over 300 individuals have received it. This rarity adds to its reverence. In the United Kingdom and countries such as Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, the VC holds a unique status. It commands not just military but public respect, often granting the recipient lifelong honors and recognition. Those who wear the Victoria Cross are given the highest precedence in matters of ceremony and protocol. In military parades, they take the front rank. In society, they are seen as living embodiments of bravery. More than that, however, they carry the weight of a legacy that is both individual and collective. Representation of what the human spirit can achieve under the most extreme conditions. The VC is not given lightly, and even after nomination, the journey to confirmation is arduous. Each case is investigated thoroughly, requiring testimonies, reports, and, often, corroboration under duress. This exhaustive vetting ensures that the medal maintains its integrity, serving as a true reflection of heroism, not influenced by politics, rank, or popularity. To be a living recipient of the Victoria Cross is to be part of an elite brotherhood. It is a silent, solemn acknowledgement that one has witnessed and contributed to something beyond the normal call of military service. These men, and in rare cases women, are honored not for following orders, but for surpassing them in ways that defy logic and demand awe. And so, when a man wears the Victoria Cross pinned proudly on his uniform, it is not simply a decoration. It is a testament to a moment, perhaps only seconds long, where he stood taller than fear, stronger than instinct, and acted with a kind of courage that transcends time. It is a medal earned in blood, sweat, and the unshakable will to do what is right. The individual at the heart of this story was no ordinary soldier. He was a royal guard, a member of a prestigious regiment tasked with the protection of the monarchy and participation in ceremonial duties of state. Beyond the stoic image often associated with guards at Buckingham Palace, these individuals undergo extensive training and uphold traditions rooted in centuries of military history. The particular guard in question was also a decorated war hero, having been awarded the Victoria Cross for his extraordinary bravery in combat. His acts of valor were not the kind often discussed in quiet circles, but celebrated nationally, earning him a place of distinction among the armed forces and the public. For this reason, he had been booked to fly first class on a commercial airline. It was not a luxury extended for leisure, but a recognition of his status and a small measure of the nation's gratitude. Flying first class for such a decorated veteran was not merely about comfort, it was about dignity. For a man who had risked everything in service to his country, this gesture of a first-class seat represented a symbolic acknowledgement of his sacrifice. It meant ease of travel, yes, but also respect. A seat that allowed him to board with dignity, sit with space and silence, and reflect, if needed, in peace. Royal Guards live under a unique spotlight. They are public figures not by fame but by duty, often called upon during major state occasions such as coronations, royal weddings, and national commemorations. Yet, behind the uniform is a human being, someone who may have fought in deserts and mountains, seen the best and worst of humanity, and emerged as a symbol of resilience and strength. The booking of a first-class ticket also aligns with common military protocol in many countries, where high-ranking officials, decorated veterans, and national heroes are granted priority in travel accommodations. It's not a rule etched in law, but a custom steeped in respect and understanding of what such individuals have endured. In this context, the Royal Guard's ticket was a continuation of this unwritten tradition. The journey was likely for official or ceremonial purposes, possibly involving his role in a public event or military function. Given his standing, his travels would have been known to relevant departments, and the logistics arranged with care. Such arrangements often involve coordination between the Ministry of Defense, the airline, and royal liaisons, especially when the individual in question has ties to the monarchy, as is typical of a royal guard awarded the Victoria Cross. As he made his way through the airport, dressed in his formal military attire, the medal was proudly displayed on his chest. It was not merely a decoration. It was a statement of his identity, his journey, and his character. The ribbon, the bronze cross, the uniform, each element told a story of courage, loss, loyalty, and enduring service. Those who noticed might have nodded in respect, while others might have paused, understanding they were in the presence of greatness. The booking of a first-class seat reflected the high regard in which he was held. It was an affirmation, not just by the military or the state, but by society at large. A silent contract that those who have given everything will receive, in return, small but significant signs of our collective appreciation. And for a man like him, that seat represented more than convenience. It was a recognition of identity, service, and above all, valor. As the Royal Guard approached the check-in counter, his appearance was nothing short of dignified. He carried himself with the quiet confidence and humility expected of a man who had seen the worst of battle and come through not just alive, but honored. His military uniform was pristine, buttons gleaming under the fluorescent lights of the terminal, the Victoria Cross prominently displayed on his chest. This was not just a flight for him. It was a public interaction with a civilian world that didn't always understand the depths of what such medals mean. The staff at the counter were moving through a long queue of passengers, attempting to process boarding passes with routine efficiency. To them, this was another busy day. But when the Royal Guard presented his ticket and ID, something in the system had changed. The airline representative, focused on logistics and numbers, informed him without emotion that his first-class seat had been reassigned. He was to fly economy, it was said plainly. No apology was offered, no acknowledgement of who he was or what the medal pinned to his uniform represented. The justification was simple, even mechanical. The flight was overbooked. Certain reassignments had been made. He had been among them, despite having paid or been booked for first-class service, either by a military body or a sponsoring institution. His seat was no longer available. The guard stood silent, processing the news. He had not come looking for recognition, nor was he the kind of man to argue or raise his voice. Years of service had taught him the value of restraint and dignity under pressure. He nodded politely, collected the economy ticket, and moved away from the counter with a posture that still exuded pride, though those watching closely might have noticed a change in his expression. A subtle shift from composure to something deeper, harder to name. The other passengers began to whisper. A few recognized the medal. A few knew what it stood for. One or two even approached him to offer words of respect. But the damage had already been done. The downgrade was not merely a change of seat. It was, symbolically, a diminishment of the recognition that should have accompanied his presence. It was a reminder that, to some, even the most sacred symbols of courage could be reduced to clerical errors and policy loopholes. Behind the scenes, the reason for the downgrade may have been as simple as overbooking or a seating shuffle to accommodate a VIP or corporate client. Airlines often make such changes based on commercial priorities, and in a data-driven environment, a name, even a highly decorated one, can get lost in the shuffle. The system does not always see the person. It sees categories, numbers, segments. A decorated Royal Guard becomes another passenger, stripped of context by an algorithm or scheduling glitch. For a man who had faced life and death situations, sitting in economy class might not have been a hardship. But the principle of the matter loomed large. His seat was not just about comfort. It was a token of acknowledgement from the state and society. Downgrading him, even inadvertently, stripped away that token and replaced it with a subtle humiliation, one he bore silently, as soldiers often do. This was not a matter of entitlement. The Royal Guard had not demanded special treatment, but the gesture of flying first class, particularly for someone of his standing, had been a matter of respect, not luxury. The uniform and medal were symbols that should have immediately communicated his importance, but they were missed, or worse, ignored. This reflected a broader disconnect between civilian infrastructure and military tradition, where service and sacrifice are not always understood or appreciated outside formal ceremonies. As he proceeded towards security, no one from the airline came to rectify the situation or offer a gesture of goodwill. No one asked why a man wearing the Victoria Cross had been reassigned to a less dignified seat. It was done, and it was done without acknowledgement. The guard moved forward quietly, unaware that this single moment of bureaucratic indifference would soon set off a chain of events far beyond what anyone at the terminal could have imagined. The staff working at the airport check-in desk were like those at any major transportation hub. Busy, overworked, moving through procedures designed to process passengers quickly and efficiently. Their eyes skimmed tickets, passports, and seat assignments, more attuned to flight numbers and boarding gates than to the subtle yet profound symbols of military distinction. So, when the Royal Guard stepped forward, medal pinned and posture impeccable, he may as well have been invisible to them in terms of recognition. It was not out of malice, but ignorance. The staff were not trained to recognize military decorations, let alone the rare and historic Victoria Cross. To them, it may have looked like any other medal. The uniform, though formal, was likely seen as ceremonial or outdated. Without contextual understanding, the cues meant to signify honor, bravery, and national pride were missed completely. The man before them was reduced to just another name on a passenger list. Therein lies the disconnect, a tragic gap between two worlds. In military culture, every stripe, badge, and medal carries weight. They are earned through years of service, hardship, and often trauma. But in the commercial, fast-paced world of airline check-in counters and ticketing systems, that significance can vanish into a haze of codes and company policy. A man with a Victoria Cross became an unknown passenger, rebooked based on some formula or seat reallocation process that failed to account for dignity or respect. Had even one member of the staff known what the Victoria Cross signified, perhaps the outcome would have been different. The sheer rarity of the medal, its association with life, risking gallantry, should have triggered an immediate reassessment. In military and royal circles, the medal speaks volumes without a single word. But in this moment, to the staff, it said nothing. The Royal Guard did not offer an explanation. Men like him rarely do. They do not seek attention, nor do they believe in flaunting their accomplishments. His quiet nature, his unwillingness to create a scene, only deepened the staff's misunderstanding. They may have taken his silence as compliance or indifference, when in fact it was strength. In many institutions, particularly those interfacing with the public, there is little to no training on how to recognize military insignia or engage with veterans respectfully. This results in painful moments where true heroes are overlooked, where sacrifices go unacknowledged, and where those who should be honored are instead treated like any other traveler. This lack of awareness, while not malicious, becomes a form of societal neglect. Even when passengers in the queue began to murmur and point out the medal, the staff remained unaware. Perhaps they were too focused on their tasks, or perhaps they simply didn't know how to respond. Embarrassment, confusion, or fear of breaching protocol might have stopped them from taking corrective action. And so, the moment passed, without recognition, without apology, and without any sense that a wrong had been done. It is a sobering reminder that the symbols of honor are only powerful when the society they exist within understands them. When that understanding is lost, even the bravest among us can be treated with indifference. And when indifference meets honor, it's not just a personal affront, it's a societal failing. The staff's unawareness was not just about a single airline error. It was about a broader lack of cultural literacy regarding service, sacrifice, and the deep meaning behind medals like the Victoria Cross. When the airline staff handed the Royal Guard his revised ticket and informed him he would now be seated in economy class, there was a brief pause. It wasn't the kind of delay that came from anger or confusion, but one of silent calculation. The man standing at the counter had been through far worse than an uncomfortable seat. He had seen fear in its rawest form, watched comrades fall beside him, and moved forward when most would retreat. A downgraded airline seat, while symbolically heavy, was not enough to provoke a public display from him. His expression remained steady, his posture firm, his voice calm. He simply nodded, thanked the staff member, and moved aside so the next passenger in line could step forward. He didn't question the decision, didn't demand reconsideration, and didn't point out the medal displayed on his chest. That was never his style. The true strength of his character was not just in what he had done to earn the Victoria Cross, but in how he carried himself in everyday moments of indignity like this. To some onlookers, his response may have seemed passive, but to anyone who understood the ethos of military discipline and self-restraint, it was a powerful act of composure. The Royal Guard had been trained never to lose his bearing, to hold his dignity under pressure, to remain unmoved by ego or personal affront. Accepting the downgrade without protest wasn't weakness. It was honor, plain and simple. He understood that respect could not be demanded. It had to be offered freely, and if it wasn't, he would not stoop to ask for it. Inside, the guard may have felt the sting, not for himself, but for what the situation symbolized. He wasn't traveling as a private citizen, but as a decorated military man representing a legacy of service and sacrifice. The seat, in that sense, was never just a seat. It was a token of respect, a nod to everything he and others like him had endured. That recognition being stripped away in the most casual of ways said something painful about how society could forget. But again, he did not voice this. He gathered his boarding pass, his small carry-on bag, and moved toward the security checkpoint. Those in the queue who had noticed the change looked on with a mix of confusion and discomfort. A few even whispered amongst themselves, but none stepped forward to intervene. It was a quiet, uneasy moment, one that would later be replayed in the minds of several witnesses who realized too late what they had seen. The guard's acceptance of the downgrade wasn't just about manners, it was about principle. In battle, he had likely faced situations that required him to act without pause, to make decisions that carried the weight of life and death. Compared to that, this moment of bureaucratic injustice was insignificant in practical terms. He wasn't about to disrupt an airport terminal or demand apologies. His mission now was simple: reach his destination, fulfill his duty, and do so with the silent resolve that had carried him through war. He found a quiet corner near his boarding gate, took a seat, and waited. There was no phone call, no escalation to a supervisor, no social media post demanding justice. He wasn't that kind of man. The medal on his chest wasn't for speaking out or making noise. It was for action. And, in this case, his action was inaction, a powerful refusal to be dragged into spectacle. It was his quiet form of protest, built on principle rather than confrontation. Even those who recognized what had happened were hesitant to approach. His stillness, his self-possession, created a kind of invisible boundary around him, not because he was unapproachable, but because he radiated a level of calm that made interruption feel wrong. the kind of calm that comes only from those who have seen the worst and come through it with grace. He did not look angry. He did not look resentful. He looked like a man who had accepted a temporary injustice without letting it touch the core of who he was. Elsewhere in the same airport, preparations were underway for the arrival of King Charles Roman III. Whenever a royal figure is set to travel, a series of carefully orchestrated steps are followed. Security is heightened. Protocol teams coordinate with airport staff. Timelines are reviewed and rechecked. But on this particular day, amidst all the official business and background movement, a small ripple of information began to spread, quietly at first, but with growing intensity. Someone in the vicinity, perhaps a member of airport staff, a military liaison, or even a passenger who recognized the injustice, had reached out to someone close to the king's travel detail. Whether through formal channels or a discreet word passed from one individual to another, the message reached royal ears. A royal guard, bearer of the Victoria Cross, had just been downgraded to economy by an airline unaware of who he was. The man had made no scene, offered no protest. He was now sitting alone at a departure gate. The king had long been known for his deep respect for the armed forces, particularly those who had served with distinction. Throughout his years as Prince of Wales and now as monarch, he had taken every opportunity to recognize veterans, attend memorials, and show gratitude to those whose courage had sustained the realm in its darkest hours. Upon hearing of the incident, his reaction was immediate and deeply personal. There was no need for deliberation. The weight of tradition and the moral compass that had long guided his service to the nation came into full force. He knew instantly that this was not just about a flight upgrade or a seating arrangement. It was about principle. The Victoria Cross is not an ordinary medal. The man who wore it had earned more than just a seat in first class. He had earned the respect of the crown and country, and to see that respect denied was not something the king would allow to pass without correction. He issued a quiet instruction, bypassing formalities, and made his way toward the gate. The appearance of a monarch at a commercial terminal is never a simple affair. Even with security details and protocol in place, such movements require discretion and speed. But this moment demanded neither ceremony nor spectacle. It demanded presence. And so King Charles moved, quickly and deliberately, toward the man who had once fought under the flag he now represented as sovereign. The news spread swiftly among the staff and those who had witnessed the earlier downgrade. Whispers filled the terminal. A few turned their heads. Some stood up, unsure of what was happening. Uniformed security quietly shifted positions. And then, as if the moment had been scripted by something larger than any of them, the king appeared, not flanked by pomp and protocol, but walking with singular purpose toward the royal guard. The man in question, still seated, noticed the movement before fully recognizing who was approaching. There was no fanfare, no announcement, just a man walking toward another man. One wore a suit and bore a crown's authority. The other wore a uniform and carried the weight of memory, sacrifice, and valor. When King Charles arrived at his side, the entire gate seemed to pause. Conversations stopped. Phones were lowered. Time briefly suspended itself as two figures, each representing the highest ideals of duty in their own ways, stood face to face. The king extended a hand and the guard rose, not out of obligation, but instinct. Recognition passed between them, not only of title or achievement, but of shared understanding. One had lived a life of service. The other had ruled with reverence for such lives. And in that instant, no words needed to be spoken. The king had arrived. The moment had changed. As the full weight of the incident reached King Charles, he didn't hesitate or delegate. He walked with quiet urgency through the terminal toward the royal guard, his presence drawing hushed attention from nearby travelers and staff alike. When he approached the man who had served his country with distinction and wore the Victoria Cross, medal the king knew symbolized acts of almost unimaginable bravery. There was no ceremony or speech. He placed a hand on the guard's shoulder, looked him in the eye, and spoke a few words with a calm gravity that only someone who understood duty so deeply could offer. Then, without fuss, he turned to the airline staff and took the matter into his own hands. The king's approach to the counter bypassed the chain of command that normally surrounds a royal presence. There was no time for bureaucracy. The staff, now fully aware of both the identity of the guard and the man addressing them, quickly moved to make the correction. This was no longer a standard passenger. It was a national figure whose courage had earned him the highest military honor. The king made it unmistakably clear through his presence and tone that this was not a favor, but a rectification of a serious oversight. The seat was reinstated, not as a luxury, but as a mark of respect. In doing so, King Charles made more than a symbolic gesture. He made a powerful public statement about the enduring value of service. He reminded all who witnessed it that recognition is not a privilege reserved for the famous, but a right for the truly brave. His direct involvement elevated what could have been a quiet insult into a moment of national clarity, where the lines between royalty and soldier blurred in a shared commitment to honor. The king's act didn't just correct a mistake, it restored a sacred principle. That sacrifice must never be overlooked, and those who bear its weight must be seen, acknowledged, and held in the highest regard. What began as a subtle, nearly silent exchange between King Charles and the royal guard soon captured the full attention of everyone in the terminal. At first, a few travelers noticed the king moving through the area without fanfare, his attention fixed on one man. Then, as whispers spread and heads turned, a wave of recognition moved through the crowd. When they realized the figure receiving such direct attention was not just any veteran, but a recipient of the Victoria Cross, the emotional weight of the moment settled over the terminal like a still fog. People stood up from their seats, some instinctively removing hats or placing hands over hearts. Military veterans present visibly straightened their backs, some saluting or nodding solemnly, understanding the quiet depth of what was unfolding. Children fell silent as parents whispered hurried explanations about the medal, the king, and the guard who wore it. For a space usually marked by flight delays, boarding calls, and the rush of modern life, the airport transformed into something sacred. This wasn't just a moment of individual recognition. It became an impromptu national ceremony. Eyes welled with tears. Applause broke out not as performance, but as a spontaneous release of pride and reverence. It was the kind of moment that seemed to pause time, where people from all walks of life, travelers, staff, pilots, civilians, united under the shared weight of gratitude. The emotional response was not about spectacle, but substance. In witnessing the king's response, the public was reminded that honor still has its place, that courage is still cherished, and that the values embodied by medals like the Victoria Cross still command a room. Some filmed quietly, not for social media fame, but because they felt they were witnessing history. Others approached the guard after, some in tears, to shake his hand or simply say thank you. The ripple of respect that began in that gate area extended across social platforms, news outlets, and conversations around the country. It reignited dialogue about how veterans are treated, how institutions can overlook dignity, and how leaders, by example, can restore it. King Charles's intervention and the public's heart felt reaction turned what could have been an unnoticed injustice into a timeless memory. A moment where patriotism was not loud or performative, but reverent, shared, and deeply human. In the hours following the airport encounter between King Charles and the Royal Guard, the story began to ripple outward, quietly at first, through passengers' whispered accounts, a few discreet photos, and fragments of video captured by those present. Before long, those fragments formed a full narrative, shared on social media platforms with captions of astonishment, pride, and renewed national sentiment. Tweets recounted the moment the king stepped in. Posts on veteran forums praised the Guard's quiet dignity, and video clips circulated showing the public's emotional response. Major news outlets picked up the story within hours, piecing together eyewitness testimony with official comments from palace representatives. What began as a simple moment of honor corrected became a viral reminder of what leadership and respect look like. Across the internet, users reacted with admiration for both the Guard's humility and the king's swift intervention, creating a wave of public discourse that transcended national borders, capturing global attention. The overwhelming public response soon put pressure on the airline involved, whose initial downgrade decision now stood as a symbol of systemic oversight. Within a day, the airline issued a formal statement acknowledging the incident and offering a full apology to the Royal Guard. The message conveyed regret for not recognizing the significance of his service and the honor he carried with the Victoria Cross. More than just words, the company pledged to implement immediate policy changes, ensuring that all veterans, especially those recognized with the highest national awards, would be identified and treated with appropriate respect in future bookings. Training programs were announced for frontline staff to recognize military honors, and special liaison procedures were introduced to handle such situations with care and dignity. The apology was widely circulated, with many praising the transparency, while others insisted it should never have happened in the first place. Still, the promise of change turned the incident into a catalyst for broader awareness and reform. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you pause even for a second, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to a One Storyteller, where we keep the voices of courage alive. Sometimes it takes one silent man and one bold king to remind us what honor really means. Until next time, stand tall, speak true, and stay legendary.